Get the opportunity to visit. Glad it's a small group. We'll keep it informal, and y'all have questions. We'll just have dialogue. But thought I'd start out just with a few words about Argent Trust, because it'll tie into some things later in terms of protection and resources and things like that. But Argent Trust Company started in 1990 in Ruston and Shreveport, and it was actually a state chartered bank, but it couldn't make loans and it couldn't take deposits.
Oh.
So what are you left with? You're left with trust. But Louisiana didn't have a trust company law, so you were a bank that had limited purpose, to trust and investment management. That's the way we started, and we've evolved a lot, grown a lot. So we started in Ruston, Shreveport. Ruston's still a home office. Started with, a couple of handfuls of people, and we now are in 16 states, 38 different cities, markets, and somewhere over 500 employees now. We started with about $45 million of assets, client assets, and we're now responsible for somewhere over $85 billion of assets. So a lot of growth, but a trust company, I guess, is sort of most like a trust department in a bank. It's really the trust department without the bank. So we do financial planning, estate planning, trust planning. We do estate administration when somebody dies. We do, of course, trust administration. We do investment management work. Retirement plans. We do cemetery trusts. We do special needs trusts. We do a whole range, of things. And a lot of times somebody will have assets, investments, with a broker, and we have a lot of good financial consultants, brokers, around town. But one of the limitations is that they can't pay your bills. They can't arrange for caregivers, and do that payroll. So there's a limitation, and that's kind of where we come in with this broader range of services, which I think is really applicable, to your line of work and the people that you're taking care of. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's kind of who we are, how long we've been around, still headquartered in Ruston. Welcome.
How you doing?
I apologize.
No problem. So we've kind of got an outline of material. Tim and I are going to go back and forth and just kind of hit some different points. So Tim, go ahead.
Okay, and we're perfectly comfortable if we hit something, you got a question, we can take it to the end, or we can stop and talk about it right there. The name of our topic we kind of came up with when we were talking to you guys was, financial fraud. We unfortunately see that in the things that Gary was talking about that we encounter in our clientele. I want to be quick to say that it's not just financial fraud of elder care. Obviously, it's anyone with disabilities. Personally, my brother got dementia in his 50s. So even though he would not be considered elderly, he was still very susceptible to the same things we'll be talking about. So anyone with caregiving for someone that's got cognitive impairment, be it from age or early or whatever, this will all apply. So as we were looking at, the broad topic of elder abuse, they tell us that there's neglect, there's physical, there's sexual abuse, there's abandonment, there's emotional, psychological abuse. We're talking today about financial, abuse, and it is very underreported. We can talk about that a little bit. Some of the insurance companies and AARP have done studies, and it's in the billions of dollars. Some say as much as $3 billion a year, because it's just underreported because it's embarrassing sometimes. You don't know what to do or who to report to. So we kind of want to go over today a little bit about what it is, what to look for, some common signs, things that we have some examples where we've changed the names, and these are real life things that have happened in, you know, in our practice that we've seen. But, as we said, financial abuse is the illegal, unauthorized use of an older individual's resources. Nursing home staff, family, or strangers, anyone, you know, that's the thing. It can be family, it can be strangers, it can be caregivers, it can be, you know, somebody that knocks on the door, you know, that's selling goods. So it's a broad study. And one of the things that we had recently, I know Paulette and knows Joe Gilsole, and Joe does a lot of work in that area. And Joe came and talked to us, and we found it helpful. I think, Gary, you're going to talk a little bit about what the Louisiana law is around elder abuse, and that's really fascinating to us.
Yeah, and I'll give my disclosure, we're not attorneys, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna do my best to tell you from this material what the law says, but in Louisiana is a mandatory reporting state, which means that if you and I see elder abuse, we are required, it is mandatory that we report it. And so, you know, you just, and I think I'm right that child abuse is not mandatory, but elder abuse is. But there are laws, both federal and state, that, you know, speak to this. So let me just read, this is from the revised statute of Louisiana. It says any person is required to report the abuse or neglect of an adult and knowingly and willfully fails to do so, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction shall be fined not more than $500 or imprisoned not more than 6 months, or both. So there are both civil and you know, penalties for not reporting. Also, if you knowingly or willfully obstruct the investigation, you know, of somebody, so, you know, if somebody reports it, if you're a family member, somebody reports you, and then you obstruct the police from doing an investigation, you know, you're guilty of that as well. Of course, if you are a person who knowingly or willfully reports false information, that's not right, you know, so you're guilty of that. And then any person who retaliates against somebody that reports, you know, is guilty under the law as well. So they're trying to set up a system where reporting, you know, say it's mandatory, but it's encouraged that people take action, you know, if you see something, say something, that kind of thing, to report it. There are, I would say, sort of exemptions. In other words, you report it, but it's confidential. Your reporting of it is confidential, and you have some immunity under the law for reporting it. So let's say you in good conscience believed or suspected that abuse was going on, you know, you didn't falsely just make it up, and you reported that, you know, then there's immunity. You can't then be
Sued or
yeah, those people can't come back and say, well, you disclosed private information or this, that, and the other. You have some immunity under the law. So they're trying to have a system where, again, it's encouraged to report it, and there's no repercussions, you know, to the person doing the reporting. So that's the way the law is set up. Let me just look here real quick. Yet it says no cause of action shall exist against any person who in good faith makes a report, cooperates in an investigation by an adult protective agency, or participates in judicial proceedings authorized under the provisions and so forth. So, you know, just be aware that, you know, you should be free to speak up and to report.
We should. So, you know, what are the warning signs? It's just like anything with a heart attack or stroke or any other physical illness. If we can spot those early warning signs, things that tip us off or things that don't feel right, then we can intervene ahead of time and can hopefully prevent a fraud from taking place or from it not being, repeated and being a large thing. So some of these are common sense and some of them you may not think about that much, but you've got an elderly or disabled person who doesn't understand their own financial situation. And you've got a caregiver that seems to restrict the person's communication with others. You need to be very aware of the social network. I mean, oftentimes our loved ones are socially isolated, and it's kind of like trust but verify. You just have to be very aware of who's coming into relationships and how those are developing. And it could be well-meaning, but you just have to have that extra diligence about, know who our loved ones are communicating with. Is there a pattern of missing belongings or property or assets that have mysteriously been transferred, into another title? Are there canceled checks or bank statements that are going to someone else that, they shouldn't be going to? One of the things that some folks do is, now with online, the ability to look at your account statements online, a lot of folks could give a loved one view-only access to, say, a checking account. They can't do anything, they can't get to it, but if it's somebody, that's trusted, they could be in there watching, another set of eyes to see if there's something that goes out. Again, obviously changes to wills, powers of attorney, any legal documents that, have either, see changes in those, we tell people they need to look at their wills and things like that at least every 4 or 5 years, because things change, laws change, kids grow up, just a lot of things change. And so these are kind of warning signs that you need to be on the lookout for. If you're looking at that, you can tell, oh, we didn't know that, mom changed the will, that kind of thing. And it does happen. I mean, Gary and I promise you, if we're reading these, we've seen them happen. So, if you get evidence of unpaid bills, why aren't some bills being paid, or eviction notice? Anybody that just shows an unusual interest on how, money is being spent, that's always a clue to somebody's overly interested in what the elder or disabled person is doing with their funds. And then obviously withdrawals that really can't be accounted for, bills. And they don't have to be large amounts. Some of this stuff is not, some of it unfortunately is, multiple thousands of dollars, but some of them can just be a couple $1,000, and so you have to be really diligent, or, you look at my credit card statement around Christmas time, you may not catch anything, you have to be diligent. So again, another thing just kind of here to talk about is healthcare fraud. It's complicated enough with all the insurance and things that you have to do, but there are people out there that do double billing. There are people that are out there that charge for things that didn't happen, and that can be caregiving, that can be, it can just be anywhere. But people know when you're dealing with a person that's impaired, and that's an opportunity, to overcharge, to falsify something. So those are just a few of the signs, and we'll talk about some more. But as we get into some of these scams that we're going to talk about, think about, what warning signs would have possibly headed those off, I guess is what our thoughts are. Do you kind of talk about some of the top ones there?
Yeah, we'll mention some things, and y'all mentioned the solar panels,
Yeah.
This morning, things that are going around, and we do have some real examples that we wanted to work in here. But let me I'm gonna mention some, you have now with technology, because I'm not sure the older you get how much time you spend on the computer, but there are those of us who spend a lot of time on the computer, and I'm constantly getting, emails, text messages, phone calls, whatever. You have no idea where they're coming from, that type of thing. We've all heard about the the phone calls, you know, saying, well, I'm your grandchild in Mexico and, you know, I need money to get home, you know, those kinds of things. Romance scams, you know. Any way that, you know, gift cards,
We've seen that one.
and yeah, we've got an example of that one, the home repair fraud. I mean, I guess solar panels isn't exactly that, but you know, your roof needs repaired or whatever. You know, you could, you know, get an email saying that you won a prize. I've got several of those recently, you know, respond to this, I've won a $500 gift certificate or whatever it is. So that all of those fake prize scams around here. People impersonate the government. You know, they'll call you, I'm with the IRS and you hadn't paid such and such, and if you don't do so immediately, you're gonna be arrested, you know, and, you know, you got that. There are investment scams, you know, that we've seen in our business. Anyway, it's probably just limited by a person's imagination as to what they can come up with. I will tell you, I'm gonna share something personally on me. So COVID hit, we're all home, working from home, all of this, we're kind of in a different state of mind of what's going on and dealing with a bunch of different things. And so, in that process, I saw, I don't know what I was looking or what, but I wanted to buy a boat. And I responded and whatever, and it was eBay, auction, eBay, whatever it is. I don't normally do it, but eBay, whatever. And so I started corresponding and whatever, and I ended up wiring $14,300 for this boat. You know what I got?
Like this size?
I didn't even get that. I didn't even get something to play in the tub with. I got zero. And we had emails going back and forth and whatever. And at one point, I remember it dawned on me, this is not right. You know, I knew what the result was going to be, although I kept dialoguing with him, hoping I could find a way in or something. So anyway, I'll say, well, I am old, but you know, I'm not that old. I still have most of my faculties. I'm still working, you know, I'm still engaged and all of that, yet I got taken advantage of. So it can, you know, happen. Now let me give you a couple of examples. One is, I'll go ahead and stay in the family, and I'll say it's my father. So my father will be 97 next month. He's in a nursing home, but he was living at home. It's been 4 or 5 years ago, and he was sort of an accountant, so he always checked his bank statement. He looked at that stuff, whatever, and he noticed on a bank statement that he got that there were some checks with duplicate numbers. So 2 checks with the same number, you know, and he looked through, and he said, I can't figure that out, you know. I mean, obviously you don't normally have in your checkbook duplicate account numbers. And he looked, he said, I didn't write that check or whatever, and he called me. I went over to his house and we looked at it, and I don't know if we were able to make any phone calls because I think it was on a weekend, but we went to the bank on Monday morning. We took all of that in, we looked at that. Somebody had gotten his check and duplicated those checks. I mean, and it was exactly his checks that somebody made blank duplicates of, and wrote checks and signed his name and did a pretty good job of forging his signature. And I mean, on the surface, it looked genuine. But we went through all of that, and the bank thankfully made good on all of that. I mean, we caught it quick. So that's one thing you have to do is when you catch something, you've got to immediately take action, you know, because there are some laws around that.
Yeah.
But we immediately went and did that. It took, you know, they opened up their investigation, they do certain things. They were pretty quick to put some of it back in, other parts of it they had to research. Took us maybe 3 or 4 weeks, you know, to get it all. And it was fine. But I mean, one of the things that we did was, I said, Dad, you're keeping too much money in your checking account. You know, you don't need that much money in there. So we've reduced that, we closed some accounts, we consolidated some things, made it simpler, you know, to keep up with. But had my dad not had his faculties to see that, it could have gone months, you know, before anybody would have ever seen it, because I didn't normally go to his house and look at his bank statements and go over that stuff. I mean, we would talk about, you know, estate planning and different things, but not down to that part of it. So to have a trusted individual, you know, be able to look at some of that, you know, is a good thing. But that's what happened to him. And it brings up, I guess, a question for y'all. I don't really have an answer, but I mean, now he's in a nursing home on the checking account. I write the checks and I sign the checks. But are y'all ever put in a position with somebody that you're a caregiver for, that you're being asked to write a check or to sign a check? Do y'all have any of those kinds of powers or authority? You do? I think you want to be careful, you know, with that. I don't know, I mean, because I'm family, I'm okay with doing it, but there have been people put in jail because they wrote checks, and there were even some examples of a person that legitimately thought they legitimately were writing a check, and they were found guilty and put in jail for it. So I don't have an answer to that. I just say, you know, raise the question. Now, Argent's a trust company, and I mentioned we can pay bills. A lot of times we will have accounts and we take over paying a person's bill. So instead of an individual doing it, we're doing it as an institution. So that's one way, if it fits a situation, you can mitigate, you know, some of that. We had a gentleman that was again older, beginning to show signs of dementia and all, and he was one of those that was online. He would, well, online and phone calls. I think he would get a phone call and he would say, if you go buy $2,000 worth of gift cards, you know, call me back, give me the numbers on them, whatever, I'll put $2,500 in your checking account. And he would do it. Of course, the $2,500 never showed up. The guy called back, he couldn't remember that it happened the week before, so he'd do it all over again. And it happened over and over again. Now, we had begun in the situation to take over some of the stuff. We didn't have all of it, but, you know, eventually got it stopped because we just took all his money and we started managing and dispersing it. But that was, you know, it's on the phone, and they can convince people to do things. Online, they can convince people. He also had a rent house, and so there were people living in the rent house without paying him any rent. So that's another way he was getting taken advantage of, like that.
That same individual had clicked on, it was the people that were doing the gift card thing, but he had clicked on a link that they had sent him, and they could see everything on his screen. So they, you know, and that was very difficult because he really wanted to keep his computer access so that he wasn't, you know, completely socially isolated, but it was just totally, you know, every time we cleaned it up, it got infected again, and, you know, so they could see they knew what was going on in his bank statements. They had total control of that. And again, it's very frustrating because he didn't know these people. They just called and started a relationship and built it. You know, they're very adept at building it over the phone. You know, you and I would think, well, if somebody called and said, "Hey Tim, this is Bob, how you doing? You know, by the way, I'm going to send you something." But I think in this guy's case, it was the promise of some
yeah, there was a
riches,
reward. It was,
reward.
yeah, if you do this, I'm going to put even more money than what you spent in your checking account.
And a lot of times on these things, they're trying to make us think fast before we have time to think critically, you know. And so that's where you get into, I've had a situation where I got a phone call and they said, you know, this is the IRS and we're going to come to your house and we're going to, you know, have a subpoena. And, you know, luckily I knew that that's not the way the IRS worked and was pretty sure I'd paid all my taxes, but it's still unnerving, you know. They know what to say, and they wanted me to, you know, send a payment right away so I could avoid the embarrassment of a sheriff coming to my house. And that's the same thing with, you know, we have a coworker, brilliant lawyer that works for us in Missouri, and his mother-in-law got a phone call that said his daughter, who was in college and law school, they said, oh, she's messed up, she's in jail, we're calling, we need you to send some money so we can get her out and not let mom and dad know. None of that was true, but they knew enough about them looking at their Facebook page that they knew they had a daughter that they were proud of. And you know, Gary was talking about the checks. I don't know about y'all, but I'm old enough to remember when I first got out in the work field, I got that checkbook and it had everything you want to know about me. It had my social security number, my phone numbers, my wife's stuff, and now we don't do that as much. But there's a lot of information on a check. There's addresses and names, and you know, again, that's, you know, and now with printing technology, they can reproduce something that looks exactly like it, you know. And the banks have a lot of, you know, anti things in place, but it just, I heard one was I was researching some of this week. The FBI just came out with one. I thought I've heard of everything. So we're all thinking artificial intelligence, and we all got to focus on that's the new thing. That's where they're going to get us. Well, this scam is kind of old school. It's been happening enough that the FBI, someone will call you and say, I'm from Regions Bank, whatever bank, one of the banks, and says, your account's been compromised. We're gonna want you to cut up your card. So you cut up your debit card, you think, oh, I'm safe, I've cut it up. And we're gonna have somebody come over and get that because we don't want it to fall into bad hands. And you think, well, that's okay, but they need the chip. All they need is the chip and the pin. And these people are able to convince you to give them, you know, oh, we have their pin number as 2222. Oh no, it's so-and-so. If they get your chip and they get your pin, and this is happening so much that, you know, the FBI is seeing it all over the country. And they'll do it till, you know, and that's a physical thing. That's a combination of, you know, not just computer, and it's very unnerving because, you know, again, it's about be careful who you let in your house. And, you know, it's always good to, you know, hang up and say, I'm going to call somebody I know at the bank directly, or a pastor or a friend, or, you know, the folks here at the bridge, somebody that can help us think, wait a minute, does this sound right, you know? So, I think that's it. Anytime anybody's asking for information, one of the things they hear me say working all the time, if somebody calls me and says it's an urgent rush, and sometimes it is, that's when we take a breath, you know, because that's usually the first thing. If somebody says, you've got to wire this right away, I have to have it right away, we just kind of have to take a breath and go, well, we're going to need to call you back at the number we have. We're going to have to, you know.
Their emergency is not my emergency.
Yeah, just, you got to pause because they're trying to take away that critical thinking. And, you know, Gary, we have two very, very bright tech graduates that they're young, but they're on the front line and they answer the phone sometimes. And, you know, we tell them all the time, just don't panic. Don't let anybody, you know, coerce you, you know, these people, and, you know, I've got money down there and I need it right away. You know, most of our customers don't act that way.
Do you all want us to hold our questions till the end?
No, I don't think so. No, that's fine.
While we're young enough to still have all our cognitive function and decision making and so forth, my experience has been with my parents and sister and so forth, who've all passed on, that we needed to take over all their financial life, you know, and responsibilities. And so you mentioned a trusted family member, an institution? What is your recommendation on who should I turn over all my financial stuff before I'm no longer capable of it? In other words, I'm being proactive and want to turn all that over, give me freedom from all my financial responsibilities and delegate it to someone else.
Well, most of us look to family first, and everybody's situation's different. You know, I know a lot of families have children, honest, sincere, you know, their parents' interest is in, you know, foremost in their mind, and so a lot of times family does work. We've certainly seen it being abused. What we recommend a lot of time, of course, we are a corporate fiduciary, so if I'm with an individual or a couple and we're looking at the assets that they have and how those are structured and where they are and so forth, and we get into, you know, your question, a lot of times we recommend what we call a revocable trust, a revocable or revocable trust. So you think about if you have an investment account, you know, with a financial advisor, broker, you have all your stocks, bonds, you know, investments in that account. You can sort of put I'll say a wrapper around that to add a layer of protection. If that broker is contacted by that owner of the account, say it's your account, you contact them and say, you know, I need $100,000, send me $100,000. They have to send it to you. If you do a revocable trust and you have certain language in it, and there are attorneys that know what language to put in there, that the trustee, a trust is its own legal entity, so you've created another entity. And the trust then gives the trustee certain powers. So if we had your money in trust and you call me and want $100,000, I'm gonna say, well, you know, explain to me a little bit about, you know, what you're doing, you know, and so forth. And I had this happen, and it was a situation where there were two deaths in the family very close together. And the lady was very emotionally distraught, with husband and a child. And she called and wanted, you know, a large amount of money. And said, why? Well, I'm going in business with my yard man, you know, and, you know, she was, I'll say, rational in her conversation, but she was distraught, you know, and underneath all of that. Well, in a trust, I have the right to say, no, you can't have the money. Again, if it's structured correctly, so it's your money, you have a right to it, but also you put me in a position, in a trust, you put some language in there where I have the right to say no. And in that situation, you know, we kind of had an argument, if you will, and I say, look, what you need to do is we'll just go to court. You know, you get an attorney and I'll get an attorney and we'll go to court. And if you present your case and the court says, give you your money, I'm happy to give you your money. So you try to put in roadblocks, you know, to just try to safeguard those funds. So that revocable trust means that it can be revoked. So if there's nothing, you know, going on and everything, you say, you know, I don't like ours, and as a trustee, I want to move my account somewhere else, then you can do it. You know, it's still, that flexibility is there, but you kind of put in a roadblock, you know, kind of be a buffer, you know, to help you think through some stuff. So we do that a lot. And in that account, we're able to pay the bills. So we could say, we'll take over paying your mortgage or your home insurance or your car insurance or your car note or whatever it is. If you employ sitters, we have a national leasing company that we use, so our caregivers are employed by the national leasing company. We get timesheets, we approve the timesheets, send them to the company. You know, so they do the payroll, they withhold taxes, they offer benefits, insurance, retirement, you know, benefits. So there's a lot of things we can incorporate. You know, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir, pretty much. So you're thinking with an attorney or a law firm better than directly with a bank?
Well, you have to
Or
have
does
it.
it make you a difference?
Well, if you're gonna do a trust, somebody has to legally draft the trust agreement. So it takes an attorney to do that. So we have attorneys on staff, we don't draft documents because we don't practice law. But you would have an attorney draft a document, you would give it to us, we would review it, we would have suggestions possibly, you know, so we work with the drafting attorney, but there has to be an attorney. Now, once you form this trust or during that process, you can decide who you want to be the trustee. You can have a family member be the trustee, you can have Regents be the trustee, you can have Argent be the trustee. There are a number of choices out there, but you would choose a trustee for the trust. But it is a separately drafted document. And
And
it's,
sometimes family's good, but you also don't, I was talking to a guy yesterday that has a trust for a daughter that's impaired, and he doesn't wanna burden his son, who's a doctor out in California. You know, he trusts him and he trusts his kids, but he also knows that that would be a lot of responsibility to lay on somebody that's, you know, right, and they would do it because it's their sister, but, you know, and again, you know, I mean, one of the things about a corporate fiduciary is that we don't die, we don't age, you know, there's, after Gary and I retire or whatever that would be, you know, there's other, it goes on, so there's some continuity of service, which is, you know, somebody goes on vacation, you got somebody part of the team, but
And you
anyway.
don't have to get in an argument with your siblings about,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
you know, what you
Yeah.
wanna do as opposed to what they
Yeah,
wanna do.
Christie may have been on the biggest one, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, so, yeah, family's important, but also family dynamics and,
Uh,
Especially when it comes to money.
That could be.
yeah, it changes a lot. We've seen the best and the worst of it.
Money and time. Who's gonna come visit,
Mm-hmm,
or who's
not?
I'm too busy to come visit.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of it, and we're not to get off track a little bit, but I tell people all the time, they go, well, you know, I trust my children, and I go, I do too, but I don't, you know, I have a daughter that got married to this last year to a wonderful Christian guy, I think the world of him, but I don't know his family dynamics of how he was raised, you know, financially. I mean, he's a CPA and a lawyer, and I think that's all good, but I guess I say that because there are spouses, there are children, you know, there are second spouses, and, you know, it changes, and so it's an important thing to look at.
Yeah, I had an occasion going back to,
When you get time.
No,
well, as I say, I was going back to the trust example. We had a gentleman at one time that had a trust that terminated, so you can put in a time frame or whatever when they terminate. And so it terminated, and he had some drug problems, you know, drug abuse problems. And it's very rare, but in his case, he created an irrevocable trust, one that could not be revoked for himself. He took all of the assets out of the trust that terminated, put them in the irrevocable trust, because he wanted to protect himself from himself, which is rare, you know, that you have somebody that has, you know, that much awareness about their condition. And he did, and he did pass away, and his children received the money, and had he not done that, it probably wouldn't have existed. So there's lots of different kinds of things you can do with trust, and you know, situations that you can address with a trust.
there's not a boilerplate trust. I mean, there are some, but you need to tailor it to your personal family situation, you know. And there are there are several very good attorneys. I know Kyle Moore's on the board here, right? And Kyle does
Yeah,
that.
that's a lot of-
There's seven,
He's
eight.
also my brother, so.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll claim him today.
That's right. Well, you know, yeah, he does a good job, and there are several in town that do. I tell people there are hundreds of lawyers in Shreveport Bossier, and they do a great job. There are some that concentrate in these areas, and you know, just like if I had a business, and I needed a good contract, I want to go to a guy that does good contract law, and I just find it important to go to people that are taking, you know, because there's a lot of extra classes that lawyers take to stay up on estate planning techniques and rules, and so it's good to go to somebody that, you know, and we can help in those areas.
Let's go back to your question.
Oh, you say your dad had too much money in his checking account, is there like a number y'all like to be in the checking
I
account?
was gonna ask that same question.
And maybe that's David's account?
Well, the least amount that covers the cash flow, I mean, it
Yeah.
varies. I mean, I can't remember what Dad had in there, but I'll tell you the amount of checks and stuff that were taken out of his account was $32,000.
Yeah, how much would you feel comfortable losing? Is
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, now there's, I mean, you can get interest somewhere else. I mean, you know, so it does take a little bit of work, but it's good. It's again, it's building that wall, right? I mean, you do, you know, one of the things we talk about is this in-person fraud we'll get into, and people come into our houses, you know, sometimes, and you know, checkbooks are a very easy thing to pick up, and you know, easy thing, but they may not know about, you know. I say treat all those kind of financial documents, investment statements, all that kind of stuff, treat that just like you would a piece of jewelry. Just don't have it laying around. Don't have it out so that somebody can see it and know, and again, take advantage of that. So, you know, I would think Gary's right. As little as possible, as, you know, because, and of course you can set it up, right? I mean, there's things to set up that you see it getting low, and, you know, you can transfer over and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, another thing we do, and this is more common in what we call special needs trusts. So these are individuals that have, you know, some kind of physical disability or maybe a mental impairment, but a lot of times it's from an automobile accident or something like that. But we have what essentially is a debit card, so a lot of times we'll give those people this card, and we can preload it with a certain amount of money, and we can restrict it as to what it can be used for. So they can't go to the liquor store, for example. But they can go, and so they spend money by using the debit card, which just maybe has $400 on it, or $200, whatever we put on there. They spend it, we see what they spend it on, we get a report what they spend it on, and when it gets low, we put some more money on it. So sometimes we can eliminate even writing the checks or as many checks because of doing it, you know, that way. Just another way to kind of control.
And it gives them a
money.
feeling of empowerment. I mean, it's true empowerment, because they still have, you know, because there is, it's not a line you cross. There's a gradual, you know, and sometimes there's, sometimes you're good one day and you may not be as good the next day, right? I mean, it's not, it comes in really handy to be able to monitor that and reload it. We can even reload it automatically, you know, when it gets down to a certain number, or every Monday or every Tuesday, you know, that kind of thing, so.
I want to talk a little bit about powers of attorney. And again, I'll do my disclosure, I'm not an attorney, so I'm gonna tell you what I understand. We had a situation one time where a guy passed away, and unfortunately some of the relatives came in and had him sign a power of attorney the afternoon after the funeral had occurred. So they had, his wife was buried, went home, you know, as you usually do, family around. Here's your power of attorney, sign this. He signed it, giving power of attorney to a relative. Relative moved him out of his house, went and bought a vehicle, went and bought furniture, television, moved into his house, you know, all of this stuff, using his power of attorney. It's my understanding, you know, if if you have a power of attorney, you're an agent for that person. It is, you have a fiduciary responsibility to use that power of attorney for the benefit of that individual. It doesn't mean you can just do anything you want. So you do have to be careful about powers of attorney. Somebody comes and presents you with a power of attorney on behalf of, you know, an elderly person and says, you know, we're gonna do whatever it is, like in this case, move you out of your house, you know, somewhere, you know, that's a red flag. And I've seen that, that happen, that abuse of a power of attorney. So, again, it's a difficult scenario, situation as to when do you say you're gonna honor one, and when do you say you're gonna not. It's kind of one of those gut feelings, you know, you gotta know your client and their situation. But you gotta make a gut choice and say, well, you know, I would say, well, you know, I need to have that power of attorney reviewed by our legal department. You know, I do something to delay the action, you know, the power of attorney, get some other people, you know, involved in it. We've got a situation right now where, there is a white collar crime unit. There is the city of police and sheriff, Caddo sheriffs are together in white collar crime. So it's one of those, we've got it, I think, in the brochure, where you can report it. But you know, you just, in some situations, you have to get them involved. Like I say, it's a mandatory reporting state, so when you suspect or see, you know, you've got to, you know, take some action. And we've got one of those going on right now because things seem to be going pretty well, but, you know, we deposited a monthly amount in the checking account and the person was writing checks, but then never had any money. You know, and we always try to do a budget. So that's another thing where you're a family member or for us, if we do the trust or anything, we're gonna say, well, let's do a budget. Let's see what, you know, at Social Security, you got retirement, what's coming in, and then what are you spending money for? You know, you got a car note, you got groceries, you got insurance, whatever. We try to build a budget so that we have an idea of what that cash flow is. And so when a person all of a sudden doesn't have any money, we say, well, what are you spending it on? You know, we look at the budget and say, well, you should have plenty left in here. Well, I just don't have any money. I got obligations, I don't have any money. Well, you know, we begin to look at it and we now believe, you know, where that money was going and what it was being spent for, and it wasn't for her, and it wasn't part of her budget. You know, there was family members, you know, coming in there. So that's currently one that we have that's under investigation.
That's where multiple banking accounts would come in to help control that, because you have one account for your monthly living expenses, SWEPCO, water bill, food, stuff like that. And like I say, when you run out of that, where did it go? Or you know that, okay, the first of next month, we're gonna put another sum of money for next month's living expenses. And that way, your bigger piles of money could be isolated, and rarely do you transfer money except for certain situations.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. And, I have an investment account or something where
Right.
if you need money, you replenish, you know, the checking account if the Social Security, retirement, whatever is not enough, you know, going in there. But it is about control
Yeah.
of that account and the money flow.
So what advice do you give families? You know, my dad is still with it. I mean, he's very, especially about money, but he doesn't want to let go of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's fine. He's, you know, mentally sound right now, but I'm just worried if he were to develop, you know, Alzheimer's or dementia, what could I do to save him from himself, kind of thing? Do y'all recommend trying to get your loved one to set something like this up before they get, it goes further down the
Yeah,
road.
that's,
Absolutely,
again,
yeah.
that revocable trust
Yeah.
with that gatekeeper language, because if we have money in an account and we don't have the check account, he's still writing checks,
Yeah.
and all of that. But we got the other money. When he then has that dementia or crosses that line and can't do, we have the ability to begin, we can write checks. I mean, we have an investment account, but we have bank accounts tied to it, so
Yeah.
we can write an urgent check,
Yeah,
that then the money comes out of his account, but it's an urgent check. So we can start writing those checks to pay those bills, so we can step in there. But I'd say one of the first things I'd tell him, I'd look at, if you can, say, how much is in the account?
oh, I know, I can see it.
Okay, and do you really need that much? And why don't we put it over here, you can make 5% on it, whatever. I mean, do those kinds of things, and just limit the amount of exposure.
Yeah, I got him to let go of some of it and put it, in a separate account, not a checking account, but he's still got way too much money in there, and I worry about that.
That's a
Well, this-
generational
this
thing
is
too.
big,
Oh, yes.
You know how that,
Yeah, he was
right?
raised in the Depression,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
is very,
Yeah,
very
Squirrel
afraid of
away.
not having money,
Right.
yeah.
that he can get to when he wants it.
Yeah, no, it's,
Well, and the power of attorney, I mean, those are valid instruments, so, for you to have a power of attorney, or Kyle to have one, I mean,
And he does have some of those documents, but then he signs them and then he starts to have second thoughts.
Yeah.
Like, now I'm not in control, even though he trusts me, you're in control, you're not doing exactly what I want you to do when I want you to do it, and I'm like,
well,
just
we,
chill out.
obviously, like any service, we like for people to get to know us and the things that we do and the services. We know that the family might appreciate it, but it's a lot better if, before he gets to that stage, we kinda call it kick the tires, find out are we really like Tim and Gary? Do we really like this setup? Or do they call me back when they're supposed to? Cause that early relationship, they wanna see that control. They wanna know that somebody's gonna call them and they got a question, and, so it's not just lip service, you wanna do that.
Yeah.
And, we have some clients that are very, not that many years ago, I couldn't get anybody to, email or anything like that. And now I have to be uber careful, because that's all I get. I get an email from, hey, this is so-and-so, I got one yesterday, changed my bank and now it goes here. Well, I gotta call him today and go, doing a callback, because I don't know that that's you. It looks like your email, but it's very terse. It doesn't say, hey, Tim, exists. And I think it's fine. I think it's legitimate, but I do. And folks like your dad's age and stuff, if they can feel empowered and be part of the transition, right? It sounds like you're doing that, but.
Yeah, I'm gonna quote you when I call him today and say, we need to move some more
No,
money.
blame Kyle, that's what we do.
Jim,
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah.
that's right. Well, and then sometimes you find out, we didn't get into it, but, we do, some people have investments, and so we do stocks and bonds, and we do that whole gamut of stuff, obviously. And I find that sometimes people think they're investors and they're really savers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that generation, sometimes they see in the video, whatever, tripling their money, and they go, I'd like to do that. And then a day, like a couple days ago, you find out, oh no, that's not me, and so that's a thing that helps a lot to iron out while they still have that cognitive ability, so that they can share in their thoughts about risk. And, we might say, you're gonna need to have this kind of growth if you wanna stay in a nice, your own home or a nursing home or whatever. But and sometimes that may conflict with, Gary knows we've had one customer that he said, I don't know, I wanna have a 23% return every year. And I'm like, well,
Yeah, we do.
yeah, sometimes we gotta take what the market gives us,
Yeah.
and, so, but yeah.
Yeah, we didn't touch on investment scams, but we see
Yeah.
those as well, because, financial products can have a lot of fees in them, a lot of hidden stuff, and, we've got own opinions about certain things, but, you know, there are a lot of, and most of it is you can make 23% or whatever, you know, if you'll do so and so, and,
Yeah.
we
I really
see those
hesitated.
through the years.
I really hesitate to bring some of them up because they're, like everything, a lot of them are legitimate, you know, and just because you use it as an example doesn't mean, you know, there are a lot of people that say, that borrow on that senior consultant, or I'm an expert in, and they may well be, there's a lot of those designations that are fine, but it is, sometimes when people go, you know, I'm a specialist in this field, or I'm a specialist with teachers, or I'm a specialist with, you know, this fraternity or whatever. They're trying to build that connection, right? You can trust me because I've got this, I'm a certified senior advisor. Well, that may not mean anything, you know, and it's back to that trust but verify. I mean, we don't mind, you know, we try to, people go, you know, we don't put our bios out there just to make ourselves look good. We're trying to let people realize we've had that requisite amount of training. We're going through how many hours? I don't know. We got 21 courses we gotta take, you know, every year to just make sure that we're, you know, up to speed on things. So anyway, we could go. I was gonna talk a little bit about the handout real
Yeah.
quick when we take some questions. This piece exists, and I think it's fine. I think it's legitimate, but I do, and folks like your dad's age and stuff, if they can feel empowered and be part of the transition, right? It sounds like you're doing that, but.
Yeah, I'm gonna quote you when I call him today and say, we need to move some more
No,
money.
blame Kyle, that's what we do.
Jim Quincy.
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah.
that's right. Well, and then sometimes you find out, you know, we didn't get into it, but, you know, we do, some people have investments, and so we do stocks and bonds, and we do that whole gamut of stuff, obviously. And I find that sometimes people think they're investors and they're really savers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that generation, sometimes they see NVIDIA or whatever, you know, tripling their money, and they go, I'd like to do that. And then a day like a couple days ago, you find out, oh no, that's not me, you know. And so that's a thing that helps a lot to iron out while they still have that cognitive ability, you know, so that they can share in their thoughts about risk. And, you know, I mean, we might say, you're gonna need to have this kind of growth if you wanna stay in a nice, your own home or a nursing home or whatever. But you know, and sometimes that may conflict with, you know, Gary knows we've had one customer that he said, I don't know, I wanna have a 23% return every year. And I'm like, well,
Yeah, we do.
yeah, but sometimes we gotta take what the market giveth, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, so, but yeah.
Yeah, we didn't touch on investment scams, but we see
Yeah.
those as well, because, you know, financial products can have a lot of fees in them, a lot of hidden stuff, and, you know, we've got our own opinions about certain things, but, you know, there are a lot of, and most of it is you can make 23% or whatever, you know, if you'll do so and so, and,
Yeah.
we
I really
see those
hesitated.
through the years.
I really hesitate to bring some of them up because they're, like everything, a lot of them are legitimate, you know, and just because you use it as an example doesn't mean, you know, there are a lot of people that say, that borrow on that senior consultant, or I'm an expert in, and they may well be, there's a lot of those designations that are fine, but it is, sometimes when people go, you know, I'm a specialist in this field, or I'm a specialist with teachers, or I'm a specialist with, you know, this fraternity or whatever. They're trying to build that connection, right? You can trust me because I've got this, I'm a certified senior advisor. Well, that may not mean anything, you know, and it's back to that trust but verify. I mean, we don't mind, you know, we try to, people go, you know, we don't put our bios out there just to make ourselves look good. We're trying to let people realize we've had that requisite amount of training. We're going through how many hours? I don't know. We got 21 courses we gotta take, you know, every year to just make sure that we're, you know, up to speed on things. So, anyway, we could go, I was gonna talk a little bit about the handout real
Yeah.
quick when we take some questions. This piece,